Why do you feel calmer behind a screen? Why do words seem softer when you type them instead of speak them? There's a strange calm that comes when silence holds your thoughts. When you text, time slows down. You move at your own pace. No rush, no interruption, just the quiet rhythm of words appearing, one by one. The silence becomes part of the language you speak. Carl Jung once said that most of what moves you lies unseen. Maybe that's why you seek the comfort of distance. It gives that hidden part of you room to breathe. No one watching, no reaction shaping your next thought, only you and the thought itself, unfolding in peace. A call demands presence. It pulls you into its immediacy. Fast, emotional, exposed. You speak before you understand, and your voice carries feelings you haven't named yet. But in text, you can wait. You can sit with what you feel before it becomes sound. You can hold a moment still, let emotion cool just enough to become clear. It's not avoidance. It's understanding. The pause is your mirror, showing you what you mean before the world hears it. Distance gives you balance. It turns emotion into something you can observe instead of drown in. It gives shape to thought and form to feeling. It lets you meet yourself before you meet the other person. Through the screen, you become both speaker and listener, detached yet aware, protected yet present. The silence between messages becomes a kind of language too. Jung believed the self had layers, some you speak, some you write, and some that live in the quiet between the two. Maybe that's what you sense when you choose to text. The quiet pull of distance. It isn't loneliness. It's the soft gravity of self-awareness, a space where thought becomes steady and feeling finds its shape. Maybe you don't choose texting to hide. Maybe you choose it to understand, to hear yourself think before the world asks you to answer. When you text, you become deliberate. You measure the weight of every word before it leaves your hands. You look at it, reshape it, breathe with it, until it feels right, until it feels safe. It's not deception, it's precision. A quiet way of deciding who you are in this small moment. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the face you wear for the world. Not false, but filtered. A necessary boundary between what's inside you and what's seen. When you text, that boundary becomes language. Each message is a surface you polish, a reflection that hides as much as it reveals. Behind every sentence lies a thought you've already edited, a feeling you've already managed. A call doesn't give you that space. It strips away the pause, the filter, the preparation. Your voice can tremble before you even know why. Your tone betrays what your words are still trying to form. But in text, you hold the reins. You control the pace, the shape, the entry point of your emotion. You choose how much of yourself to send. You can soften the sharp edge of anger or polish confusion into calm. You can speak gently, even when your heart beats unevenly. You can sound composed while learning what you really feel. Jung believed that the persona isn't an illusion. It's a bridge. It allows you to meet the world without being swallowed by it. When you text, that bridge is visible in every word you write. It's where honesty meets restraint, where expression meets self-awareness. Sometimes you pause before hitting send. You look at what you've written, and in that small hesitation, you see yourself more clearly. You sense what's too much, what's not enough, what feels true, what feels like protection. That moment of reflection, that's where the hidden and the spoken selves meet. You are not lying in that pause. You are translating, taking the raw shape of feeling and turning it into something the world can hold without breaking it. It's strange how a simple message can carry so many layers. Words that look light on the surface, but beneath them, entire systems of meaning, emotion, and restraint. You build them carefully, line by line, until they sound effortless. Jung might say this is how you balance the inner and outer worlds. The written self becomes your mediator. A version of you that can face others without betraying everything that stirs inside. You craft your persona not to deceive, but to survive connection without losing clarity, to remain sincere, but protected, present, but not overwhelmed. And maybe that's why you prefer the written world, because it allows you to participate without dissolving, because it gives you just enough space to stay connected while staying whole. The mask you wear in text is not false, it's chosen. It's a rhythm between honesty and caution, a design shaped by quiet awareness. And when you press send, it's not just a message you release. It's a fragment of your managed self, a reflection polished by distance, delivered in silence, sent across the space that keeps you steady. You send a message, and then there is silence. Not absence, but a suspended moment, a stillness that hums with quiet thought. In that gap, something happens. You wait, but the waiting becomes its own form of reflection. Carl Jung spoke of the dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious mind, a conversation that unfolds in pauses, not in words. Perhaps the space between messages is where that dialogue breathes. The delay gives you time to listen to yourself. You reread what you sent, you sense the emotional residue it left behind, you consider what might come next. In that interval, you learn what you really meant. A phone call allows no such space. It moves too quickly, each sentence chasing the next before it fully forms. Emotion becomes reaction, and reaction often outruns understanding. But texting slows the current. It builds small islands of stillness where thought can settle. Those seconds, sometimes minutes, are the difference between expression and awareness. You might find comfort in the rhythm of these pauses. The waiting feels measured, like breathing through a quiet storm. You control the tempo. You decide when to respond, when to retreat, when to let silence speak for you. The space between messages becomes a private workshop of meaning. You reconstruct emotions into language, reshape confusion into clarity. You remove what feels too sharp. You add what feels too distant. Each revision is a negotiation between who you are and who you wish to appear to be. And sometimes you notice how silence begins to speak back. A delayed reply can hold weight, uncertainty, thoughtfulness, or restraint. You begin to read the spaces as carefully as the sentences. You see that absence can communicate more than presence. That silence, when chosen, has its own vocabulary. In these gaps, awareness deepens. You sense how your emotions evolve while you wait. The quick rush of reaction cools, and what remains is the distilled truth of what you feel. Texting teaches you patience with yourself. It reminds you that clarity often arrives in silence. Jung believed that what is unconscious seeks expression. But expression need not be immediate. It can arrive through delay, through the slow refinement of thought. The pause between messages becomes that quiet laboratory where emotion transforms into understanding. And so you begin to trust the space. You no longer rush to fill it. You let words arrive when they are ready. The screen becomes a landscape of measured exchange, a conversation carried not just by text, but by the invisible rhythm of waiting. You learn that connection doesn't always live in constant contact. It can also exist in the restraint between replies, in the deliberate silence that allows both sides to breathe. And in that breathing space you find something rare, a calm awareness of your own mind unfolding in time. You often think distance means disconnection, but here it becomes balance. It becomes the quiet structure holding your emotions steady, like invisible scaffolding built from time and intention. Carl Jung once suggested that awareness begins when you can observe yourself. That's what texting allows. You observing you. Not detached, not numb, simply aware. A pause before emotion becomes action. A breath before reaction becomes release. When you speak aloud, emotion travels too quickly. It rushes past thought, wrapped in tone, tension, the tremor of voice. But when you type, the feeling must pass through reflection first. It must cross the small bridge of thought before it reaches the world. And in that crossing, it changes. Not lost, but clarified. You learn the difference between restraint and suppression. Suppression hides. Restraint understands. Distance gives you that understanding. It lets you feel fully, but respond wisely. It lets you hold emotion in open hands instead of clenched fists. You can look at your words before they're sent and ask yourself, is this what I really want to say? You can see anger cooling into honesty, confusion softening into meaning. That's the quiet alchemy of distance. It turns reaction into intention. This space is not cold, it's measured. It doesn't dull your feeling, it refines it. You become both participant and observer, in conversation not just with others, but with your own evolving mind. Jung believed integration required awareness of opposites, instinct and reason, emotion and understanding. Texting gives you the room to hold both, to feel deeply, yet think clearly, to be close, yet not consumed. And sometimes that distance protects more than just peace. It protects meaning, because words sent in haste often speak for the moment, not for the truth. But words that wait, words that pass through silence, carry something steadier. In that silence, you balance your inner and outer worlds. You adjust the weight of emotion against the shape of thought. You find a rhythm that belongs to you. Neither retreat nor confrontation, just deliberate connection. This balance is not indifference. It's mindfulness disguised as distance. It's you learning to steer emotion instead of being carried by it. You recognize that feeling something does not always mean expressing it immediately. Some truths grow clearer when they wait to be spoken. So you let distance do its work. You let silence absorb the static. You trust that emotion, once observed, becomes wisdom. And in that quiet steadiness, you discover that control isn't about holding back. It's about knowing when to release. You live in a world that never stops speaking. Messages travel faster than thought. Notifications pulse like tiny heartbeats, reminding you that someone, somewhere, is waiting. And yet, you pause. You choose the slower way. You choose the quiet of the screen. Carl Jung believed that the world outside mirrors the world within. Maybe that's why you find comfort here, in this small, glowing space where words can breathe. Texting lets you stand at a distance, watching connection unfold without being swallowed by it. You are close enough to feel, but far enough to think. You sense a paradox. The closer technology brings you to others, the more it reveals your own inner landscape. Each message is a reflection, a glimpse into how you wish to be seen, and how you are still learning to understand yourself. You read between the lines, in the pauses, in the subtle changes of tone and timing. You notice how silence feels different depending on who it's from. You begin to realize that communication is not only in what is said, it is also in what is withheld, in what lingers unspoken, in what takes time to arrive. The mystery is not in the words themselves, but in the quiet tension that surrounds them. You are never certain what lies behind the next message, and that uncertainty keeps the exchange alive. It's the same uncertainty that lives in the human psyche, the unknown depth Jung spoke of, the shadowed part that can't be fully named. You sense it in every conversation that drifts between clarity and silence. You might wonder if this distance is isolation, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like awareness, like you are part of something invisible, a network of minds thinking before they speak, listening inward even as they reach outward. You text not because you fear closeness, but because you respect the space where understanding grows. You have learned that emotion needs air, that meaning takes shape slowly, that presence can exist even without sound. Through the written word, you connect differently, not through volume, but through intention. Each sentence is a trace of thought, a bridge built carefully across distance. You no longer chase immediacy, you seek precision, honesty, wrapped in calm. And perhaps that's the real mystery of it all. That technology, often accused of detachment, has become a mirror for your own introspection. It gives you the illusion of separation, but in that separation, you meet yourself. You begin to see that connection is not always about closeness. Sometimes it is about clarity. Sometimes understanding grows best in silence, and in that still space between messages, you feel something rare. Not loneliness, not escape, but balance. A quiet awareness that through distance you have found a clearer way to speak, and maybe a clearer way to be. After you send a message, a stillness spreads. It's not silence, exactly, more like a soft, suspended awareness. Your words have left you, yet they still hover in your mind, half yours, half belonging to the space between. You read the message again, not to check for errors, but to feel the rhythm of what you released. You notice how your own tone looks different once it's outside of you, colder maybe, or clearer, like hearing your voice from across a distance. There is something strangely revealing about that moment. You see yourself from the outside, as if the words themselves are holding up a mirror. Carl Jung believed that what you project into the world often returns as a reflection of your inner state. Maybe this is that reflection in motion, you observing the echo of your own intent. You wonder how your message will be received. Will it land gently or ripple into something unintended? The meaning is no longer yours to control. It now lives in another person's interpretation, colored by their emotion, their timing, their silence. You can't follow it there. You can only wait. And so you enter the space of unknowing, the moment after expression, when the outcome is still forming in the unseen. You might glance at the screen, watching for signs of movement, a typing bubble, a reply, a shift in light. But the real movement is internal. You begin to sense how your own emotions shift and rearrange in the face of uncertainty. There is a small restlessness, a flicker of curiosity, a quiet test of patience. You feel the pull to check again, to seek reassurance that you've been understood. But deeper than that, you start to notice your own pattern, the way you hold your breath between expectation and calm. This is where self-awareness begins to unfold. Jung might say the conscious and unconscious meet here, in the tension between what is known and what is not yet revealed. You feel both exposed and invisible. You've shared something real, but it's adrift now, moving through the unseen thoughts of another. You find yourself reading silence like a language. Was the pause deliberate? Was the delay thoughtful or indifferent? The human mind fills the unknown with meaning. And here, in this quiet gap, your imagination takes over. You create narratives from absence. You listen to what isn't said. Yet even in this uncertainty, there's beauty. You begin to see how communication is never complete, how it lives as a living thread, stretching, shifting, changing between minds. Your words no longer belong to you alone. They become part of a shared field of thought. And your waiting becomes a form of participation. In that waiting, you see yourself clearly. You notice your desire to be understood, your fear of being misread, your quiet hope that the space between will remain kind. It's not just the message you're watching, it's your own reflection. You are studying the way you respond to absence, how you navigate the silence that follows expression. Jung believed that what you avoid often reveals who you are. Maybe that's why this echo matters, because it shows you what you long for when nothing is happening. It teaches you patience, and with it, humility. You cannot control how you are received. You can only learn to be at peace with what you've given. So you let the silence breathe. You let it hold your words without demand. You begin to realize that connection doesn't end when you press send. It simply changes direction. The dialogue moves inward now, toward self-observation, toward calm understanding. You start to find meaning not in the reply, but in the quiet that follows it. The echo becomes a teacher. It reminds you that communication is as much about listening to yourself as it is about being heard. And maybe, in this gentle uncertainty, you discover something simple and true. That every word you send out returns not always as an answer, but as insight. Each message becomes a mirror, each silence a lesson. And in the echo after sending, you meet the version of yourself who finally understands the power of restraint, the strength of waiting, and the calm wisdom that lives in unspoken space. There comes a moment when you stop waiting for replies, not out of indifference, but because something inside you grows quiet. The silence that once felt heavy begins to feel natural, almost cleansing. You realize that every conversation has two directions, one that moves outward through words and one that moves inward through thought. And it's the inward one that begins to matter more. You start to notice patterns in your own communication, how often you hesitate before pressing send, how carefully you balance truth and tone, how distance shapes not just what you say, but who you believe yourself to be. The longer you observe, the more you understand that these small acts of restraint are not just habits, they are reflections of your evolving self. Carl Jung wrote that the mind seeks wholeness, and that wholeness requires seeing both light and shadow. Here, in your quiet digital rituals, you begin to meet both sides, the calm, deliberate one that writes carefully, and the restless, unseen one that waits in silence. They live side by side, speaking to each other through the space you've created. In the mirror of stillness, you see your mind as it truly is, restless, careful, searching, awake. You understand that communication was never only about being heard. It was about learning to hear yourself, clearly, calmly, without noise. And maybe that is the quiet truth behind it all, that you never really preferred texting over calling. You preferred the space it gave you to understand your own voice before sharing it with the world. In the end, it isn't about messages or replies. It's about what happens in the quiet between them. You've learned to live inside that pause, to find meaning not in constant exchange, but in the still rhythm of thought and restraint. What began as control became understanding. What began as silence became self-knowledge. Now, when the screen glows and waits, you no longer rush to fill it.